Good evening. My name's Arnie Eby. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Resource Parent Association, and I'm glad to be here with you again this evening to talk about subjects that affect resource parents in the state of Maryland. We're thankful you're here, and please, like I said before, if you want training credit, place your name and jurisdiction in the chat. Tonight, our subject is resource parent practice profiles. About 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to attend the program improvement plan convening that was hosted by SSA in Towson, Maryland. There I was introduced to many of these concepts, ideas, some of the charts that you'll see tonight. And this evening, you're going to get a glimpse of these ideas and how these ideas and principles are used to develop and lay the foundation for practice around resource parenting in the state of Maryland. So tonight, Kim Parks-Braun from DHS SSA is going to be with us to share. I will be shifting the hosting responsibilities to her here in a minute, so she'll be able to share her PowerPoint and etc. with you. And we are looking forward to her presentation. So welcome. And after her presentation, or during the presentation, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll keep track of them. And then there'll be a time for question and answers at the end. Once again, like I said, this practice profile is foundational to the policies that we will be discussing in the next month. The comfort calls and icebreaker, which, to name just a few of the policies that the state of Maryland is implementing to enhance the relationship between resource parents and families of origin. So welcome, Kim. Thanks for joining us, and you are the host.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I guess I wanted to start, before I pull up the PowerPoint and get started, I wanted to just kind of get a sense, and certainly if any of you do have video cameras, it's always helpful to be able to see folks when you're presenting. So I really would invite you to, if you can. Hey, everybody. So thank you for doing that. I want this to be as interactive as possible. And to just get us started, I just wanted to get a show of hands in terms of folks that are resource parents on the line. Can you, do you know how to do the, okay, great. So we have quite a few. And do we have any resource home workers from local departments with us? Yay. Okay, we have a few. So some of what we're going to talk about tonight is, you know, we're going to be talking about the integrated practice model. And as Arnie said, the practice profiles that are hopefully going to help guide some of the shifts in practice that we hope to be seeing as a part of our integrated practice model implementation. So without further ado, I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint here. And go ahead, and everybody can see that, I hope.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so what we're going to talk about tonight basically is Maryland's integrated practice model, and a little bit about what led us to this point. Some of you may have been around for a while, and you've seen a lot of changes happen, particularly in child welfare. And so Maryland's integrated practice model is really the culmination of a lot of different things that we're going to talk about. A very important driver of it is the Family First Prevention and Services Act. How many of you here, just show of hands again, have heard about Family First Prevention and Services Act? Is that something you're somewhat familiar with? So we have some people. Do we have anybody here that is not familiar with the Family First Prevention and Services Act? So it looks like Morgan has her hand up and Tori. Anybody else? Amy? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we are also going to talk about the, like I said, the integrated practice model. And how many of you are familiar with the integrated practice model? Anybody? A few raised hands. Okay. All right. So we've got a lot of different people that maybe have heard some of this and some of you haven't. So, but the goal tonight really is to focus on the role of resource parents, give you a little bit of an overview of the integrated practice model and what that means for practice in Maryland, how it will impact you. We're going to talk about the resource parent practice profile. That is an important tool to be used in the future in terms of how practice should look and what you can expect in terms of practice shifts. So without further ado, I'm going to shift my slide here to our famous house, our DHS house. This is sort of become the symbol of the Department of Human Services strategic vision for child welfare. And so whenever I share this, I like to always kind of reference the fact that, it's a house, and people, when I ask the question, why do you think we chose a house? Most people inevitably think it's because a house, it's a place where families and children live, which is partially true. But the other important symbolism about the house is the fact that it is a framework. It's a structure. And just like any building or dwelling or structure, if we don't update it from time to time, it's going to fall apart, right? If we had it, if any of you have lived in an old home before, that updating and if we, for example, moved into a 1920s farmhouse and we had the plumbing today that we had in 1920, we'd kind of be in trouble. So Maryland's child welfare system is pretty old, and we have really, thankfully, adopted a lot of practices, a lot of new information over the years that we've needed to incorporate into the way that we do practice. And that is what our integrated practice model is all about. So there are a number of initiatives like this that are sort of the foundation or framework that have led to us developing a practice model. And some of those things are place matters, our efforts at really trying to limit congregate care for kids. And, there have been a number of others. Family-centered practice is one. The initiation of family team decision meetings in our practice and our work was a very important stride that we've made in recent years. So there have been a number of things that have sort of led to this point. But one of the most important pieces to this shift that we're seeing now in practice has been Family First Prevention and Services Act. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but it's a federal piece of legislation that is really aimed at helping us be able to fund, for the first time ever, prevention services for families and children and youth in our state. And so there is going to be and is right now the development of a lot of different resources, evidence-based practice resources for children and youth in order to prevent children coming into care. But when they do come into care, there are some other best practices that we're really looking to promote and shift and continue to build upon some of the practices that really have we've seen success with in recent years. One of those, of course, being family-centered practice. So I have a few symbols on the screen here to kind of symbolize what we can expect with this shift. One is, you see the person in the middle with a lot of spokes around them, and that is sort of to symbolize family-centered practice. The inner workings of our system really undergoing some shifts and some more emphasis on prevention in our work. And then you see the two hands shaking to symbolize partnership. And that's really an important aspect of your role as resource parents, is we're going to start to continue to see some shifts in the way that we partner with resource parents. And that's going to be a very big practice shift expectation. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And I wanted to kind of kick off tonight with sharing a brief TED Talk with you around the topic of teaming, because that's really how we see our resource parents being an integral part of our teams, especially as we move through some of the expectations we have around the integrated practice model in practice. So I am going to try to share this. I'm going to back out of this for just a minute and stop sharing so that I can share the TED Talk. Can everybody see that? So what did you guys think about that TED Talk? Come on, say a few words. What did you think? And what does it have to do with being a resource parent? Anybody?
Take time to get to know people better. Try to figure out children's strengths and build on those.
Yeah, she talks a lot in that video or that TED Talk about situational humility, right? How many of you have been in a place of situational humility with the children in your care, you know, or in any, you know, there's so much metaphoric about that TED Talk, and we show that in our integrated practice model training. So for those of you resource home workers, you may have seen it before in if you've already participated in module 2 of the training. But we share this because it really, I think, embodies the direction that we really need to head in terms of teaming. It talks about how important teaming is a part and a way of life in our work world across systems, right? Across cultures, across all kinds of different boundaries right now, that we've got to be able to get our work done in teams. It's, you know, it's impossible to do it alone. Morgan, it looks like you have your hand up. Did you want to say something? We have built a lot through family-centered practice around teaming. And with the integrated practice model, as I'm going to share in a few minutes, one of the reasons we're continuing to use that as a focal point in our practice model, and to take that hopefully beyond family teaming into some of the policies you're starting to see with as Arnie had mentioned, with the comfort calls and the other aspects of that particular policy in terms of building better teamwork, you know, icebreakers and, you know, parenting agreements and so forth, because we need to do that for the future of our children in this system, and there's no other way to do it. So I just want you, I love that TED Talk. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. I think it's a great segue into this talk tonight, because I want you to think about it, reflect on it as we're talking about the integrated practice model, and to think about ways we can all, whether you're a resource home worker, whether you're a resource parent, be a part of this team and to really have that situational humility. We don't have all the answers. We don't know what is going to work with every, child that comes into your care. I mean, it's really important that we continue to foster teamwork, and it has to become a really important tenet of how we do our work in the future as well, to move and continue moving in that direction. So any other thoughts or comments or reflections on that before we?
We have two comments in the chat. One says we have to quickly work together with people we've never met before. And the other one says children are the ultimate source of humility. So that's two comments that we had in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and again, there are a lot of different culture clashes in the system, right? We have court, which is one thing and has one set of expectations. We have the system itself. We have resource parents. We have biological families and relatives and all kinds of other aspects and community stakeholders that are a part of our system and a part of those teams. So I just think it's really important to think about and get creative. And hopefully, as we continue to work towards implementation with the practice model, it will allow us to be able to really reach across those boundaries and creatively problem solve even more than we do already. So let me share my screen again and get back to PowerPoint. All right. So Families First Prevention and Services Act it basically was signed into law in 2018, and it really provides it's something that's never happened before. As I said earlier, it's provided a funding structure for us to be able to pay for prevention services. Our system has always been set up to only pay for foster care for kids who come into care. And so there's going to be a greater emphasis as we continue to roll this out. We are one of the first states in the country that actually got approved to implement Family First. So we are really kind of on the forefront of this work. And there are three guiding principles that are really important, that we're helping families whose children are at risk of coming into care, ensuring that children in foster care can hopefully live with a family, and to provide more better quality care if a child does have to go into residential placement or a congregate care, that there's going to be better quality because there will be criteria that folks will have to uphold in order to be licensed as a qualified residential treatment placement. So those are some of the tenets of this legislation that are really guiding some of the practice changes that we're seeing in our system right now. So the integrated practice model, how does that fit with Families First? So as I said before, these two kind of trends are kind of merged at the same time, but the integrated practice model really is a way for us to build some consistency across the state in terms of how practice happens. We are creating policies that echo what is in Family First, that we're really focusing more and more on prevention, being family-centered, better teaming in our system to be able to support children staying with a family or with their family of origin. So those are some important pieces of the convergence of the integrated practice model with Family First. And it's really to help us to ensure that children, families, and vulnerable adults expect and experience the same quality of care across the state. And so I wanted to share with you now what our practice model looks like. Has everybody seen this key infographic? Is there anybody that has not? Okay, we have a few people that have not. So this is Maryland's integrated practice model, and it's made up of values, principles, and practices in our work that really they encompass how we do our job in the system, and they also encompass what practice should look like across the board. And we've really collected a lot of this information based on research, based on knowing what works in practice. And the other thing I want to say about this is that this isn't something that we just picked out of a hat. It's something that was built over 2 years and involved focus groups, discussions. We included resource parents in the development of the practice model, as well as workers, frontline staff, supervisors, leadership, court partners, community stakeholders. All were a part of our discussions and forming of what we came to collect as these principles, values, and practices in our practice model. And so our core practices, our core values are in the center, and those are collaboration, advocacy, respect, and empowerment. We expect that no matter where you are in the state of Maryland, that these particular values are exuded in the way that we do our work. And so the placard of the key, all of the different multicolored pieces in the center are our principles. And so one of them is family-centered. Obviously, again, as I said earlier, this builds on family-centered practice, being culturally and linguistically responsive to families, respectful of their cultures and their traditions, and being outcomes focused. And that doesn't just mean spreadsheets. It means making sure that what's happening is working. Is it working for this child and this family? And if it's not, we need to be adapting and making sure that we change the plan, that we make sure that what we're doing really is something that people can see success with. And then that it's individualized and strength-based. Not every plan should be the same. We shouldn't have cookie cutter service plans. And quite often we see, and this is an area that we're working on as well to hopefully get to this point, is really helping us not have, court-driven plans for families so much. Court does one thing, but that doesn't mean it has to drive every single aspect of service. So that's another big shift that we're working toward. And, having a safe, engaged, and well-prepared professional workforce. Our workforce works hard. They do things and go into situations that you can only imagine. And so it's really important that as we continue to build on these core practices that we know work, one of the things that we need to make sure that we're always putting at the forefront is that people feel psychologically safe to be able to share, to be able to team better, to be able to really have an environment of learning and building upon what we know works, and to have creative license in their work, and not be fearful of retribution. So that's a really important piece of what we're also working toward with the safety culture model that we're going to be hearing more about as we continue to move into the coaching phase of the integrated practice model. That we're community focused, that we build on the work that happens in our communities, and that our community wraps around the families and children that we care for. That we build partnerships within our communities, and that not every responsibility can possibly fall on the Department of Social Services. We can't do everything or be everything to everybody. We have to work as a team. And of course, being trauma responsive. We know so much more about trauma now than we ever did early on in our system. And what we know is that whether we like it or not, the way we respond sometimes re-traumatizes kids. And so we have got to work, continue to work and build on what we know in terms of trauma and apply it to the way that we're teaming and wrapping our, our resources around children, youth, and families, so that we can understand how trauma has impacted them and to be able to minimize its impact moving forward. And then, of course, we have our core practices of engaging, teaming, assessing, planning, intervening, monitoring, adapting, and transitioning through our system. And so teaming, as you can see, is a really important piece of that. And making sure that we are using all of the members that are a part of a family's natural support system, but also using resource families as, a part of that support. If you are co-parenting or parenting a child in your care, it's really important that we continue to build the relationships so that, there can be some either strengthening that happens in being able to support children across, across the boundaries of biological parents and resource parents. And so that, we do continue to make sure that that information is communicated and that there is as much continuity as we can possibly build in the supports that are available to children, youth, and families. So again, I talked about this a minute ago, our core values of collaboration, advocacy, respect, and empowerment. The acronym of CARE is what we use when we think about those core principles in the practice model. And this is what we expect, is that, we're going to be collaborating, that we're going to be advocating, and that it's done in a respectful and empowering way. So what we're seeing right now are some policies that you are, one that has recently rolled out, the Promoting Partnerships Between Families of Origin and Resource Parents policy, and another that's soon to be released on family teaming. These two policies, again, will reflect the shifts in the IPM. The teaming policy in particular is going to really be shifting the way that we consider teaming. We've traditionally thought of family team decision meetings as the primary vehicle for teaming in our system, but we really want to make sure that people know that teaming is expected from the minute that we intervene with a family, that we're continuing to take inventory of those natural supports, including them in conversations, obviously making sure that families feel comfortable and like they can include members of their support system at any time and at any point in some of these important decisions that have to be made collaboratively for the care and safety of children. And so the Promoting Partnerships Between Families of Origin and Resource Parents policy also reflects some of those shifts and expectations around teaming. So this is just a chart to sort of share with you, again, how it all connects. So we see some practice shifts in the Promoting Partnerships policy around the icebreakers and the comfort calls and the teaming and co-parenting contracts. Again, these reflect the practices of engaging, right? Engaging families and resource families and teaming with them and assessing together and collaboratively what needs to happen, what's important about their care, maybe co-educating each other, as well as planning for, what needs to happen for reunification, as well as their staying in care. And so the same with teaming. We expect that teaming is going to happen beyond formal meetings. Sometimes teaming needs to be happening in dyads or triads. Not everything requires a full family team decision meeting, and we're hoping that some of those family meetings can also prevent having to go that far into the continuum of teaming, if at all possible. that any type of team can be used to enhance protective factors and, you know, sustain safety and minimize risk. So practice profiles, this brings us to what is a practice profile? So basically it's a team for operationalizing a defined strategy. And it promotes a shared understanding of what our practices are and what their requirements are. It builds knowledge, skills, and competency, and it uses data and observation to continuously improve practice. So we have recently released, as I said before, the promoting partnerships policy, and there were some practice profiles that I'm going to talk about tonight that were also shared across the state with the release of the policy. If for any reason you didn't get a copy of that or you need a copy, I can certainly send that to Arnie so that you all have it to refer to as well. So this is the introduction of the practice profile for resource parents. And it basically starts with a quote from a resource parent. You know, what really being included and being part of the team means to this particular resource parent is just inviting me to meetings, listening to my opinion, and, you know, making sure that that you're a part of that team and that you are a part of the collaboration and that you do share and give input. And when that doesn't happen, as this particular resource parent shared, it, you know, it makes you feel undervalued and disrespected. So that's going to be a really important part of this, you know, the shift and sort of the North Star that we want to follow is this practice profile. So the purpose of it is to clarify expectations, to make sure that parents who are caring for children and or vulnerable adults in their care and are involved with the system, to build on the notion that resource parents are best able to provide and care and support children and families, and informed to represent and are involved directly in the care of children and vulnerable adults. Resource parents can be most effective when involved in assisting the agency and family and, you know, being a part of the goal planning, the addressing of concerns, assessing progress, and shared decision making. Some of this, you know, again, we put the family at the center. So some of this teamwork is a little more nuanced than we're used to. And
I've been really patient, sweetie.
did you have something to say, Steve?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. So again, this is a shift that's really important, and you know, in some cases it happens regularly, in some cases it doesn't. And so again, the IPM is a part of you know, building that consistency and how we team and are inclusive with resource families. So our goals as resource parents are to create a safe and supportive environment for children, youth, and emerging adults, being equipped with knowledge and training to address the complex needs of children in our care. So this again is a part of what this profile of a resource parent would look like through the lens of the IPM. Developing relationships with birth parents to provide support and mentorship as needed. Advocating concerns and needs and strengths, and, you know, making sure that there's true partnership with children, youth, and emerging adults and their families as a member of the team. Partnering with birth families and families of origin during visits to model and support parenting strategies and promote reunification. We are going to be the Center for Excellence grant. I don't know if that's something that you all have been told, but there are some pilot counties around the state that are going to be using this visitation model. And then hopefully that will transfer to the rest of the state pretty quickly. So we're really excited about that. And that is definitely a part of the practice profile. these are some ways that we expect family-centered, trauma-responsive, outcomes-driven, and individualized and strength-based principles to look and practice. That we do support children, youth, and families as much as children and youth in our care. Really thinking about the whole family and permanency plan, and permanency planning in mind. And during family and sibling visits and promoting that, again, putting the family at the center by valuing and incorporating their opinions and insights. And again, sometimes that takes time in that relationship building. We don't expect that one comfort call or one icebreaker is going to change the world. And sometimes there's resistance. So we hope to continue to promote training and supports to, get to this ideal in the practice profile. When we say trauma responsive, we mean really proactively working with individuals and families in conjunction with caseworkers, in order to, again, minimize re-traumatization and to understand what trauma looks like and how to plan appropriately and to utilize other members of the team as much as we can. Sometimes you need extra supports as resource parents and respite and so forth. How can we expand on that or build on that? So that's a part of it as well. Outcomes driven, making sure that we work with the family team to contribute information so that we are continuing to look at what is the outcome? What has the outcome been for this child in your care? And what are the things that we need to continue to put in place? Or what do we need to add to the mix to support you as well as the family? Being individualized and strength-based, again, we interpret individual and family behavior as strengths in, acknowledging that each youth, child, or emerging adult in our care is unique and requires customized care and support, and being able to voice those needs on their behalf as well. Being culturally and linguistically responsive means, being able to attune and respond to the individual or family's particular cultural needs, making sure that we honor and celebrate them accordingly, and understanding their value system, understanding our own possible biases sometimes with that too. Being community focused, we work with the family team and community supports to collaboratively support children, youth, and emerging adults in our care, as well as seek their assistance. And again, having a safe, engaged, and well-prepared professional workforce, making sure that everybody receives, the support they need. Secondary traumas are a very real thing. It also creates our own ladders of inference in different cases, which is part of why sometimes, we tend to drift to, this is what this looks like, or I've seen this before. We want to make sure that we have checks and balances in our system for ourselves, for our workers, for our resource families, so that, we can look at everybody as an individual and remember there are strengths and biases we all bring to the table, and being able to talk about that openly is a part of that process. Again, I said before, teaming is the centerpiece of the expectation with the promoting partnerships policy in particular, but it's a really important part of the work moving forward. And so there is a practice profile on teaming to promote those partnerships and what that looks like, which again was rolled out with the policy. And so the idea with this is that the department really collaborates with and supports both parents and resource parents. And, making sure that everybody is fully and equally represented, and informed and engaged to support youth and their families and support systems. As a team, resource parents and birth parents, along with the support of the local department, should be involved in developing goals and addressing concerns. And, sometimes, it is a process. It's not something that's going to happen just because you've had an icebreaker or, and sometimes, or a comfort call. It's something that's going to take time and is a part of building a team, is building that relationship. So our goal in teaming between staff, resource parents, and birth parents is to create, again, that safe and supportive environment for children, youth, and emerging adults. They feel safe when they know that their support system is working together rather than not. So that's why the comfort calls and the icebreakers and the continuum of contact are not the be all and end all, but they're structures and frameworks that we can set in place and expectations and practice so that we can really build those relationships from the ground up, from the beginning. What we know, and one of the reasons that we really put this in place is because we know that those contacts early on, if we can promote them, really help and work. And again, create that atmosphere of support. So being equipped with the knowledge and training to address those complex needs of children, and then developing relationships with birth parents to provide support and mentorship as needed. Those relationships, not just with, but with extended family too. As teaming becomes a greater focus of our work, the hope is that we continue to, bring those relationships with a child, whether they're in care or, helping to bolster and support those supports and using them to enhance protective factors in the home. So that's a really important tenet of this practice profile, and what that will look like is that teaming, again, is core to all of it. And then partnering during visits to model and support useful parenting strategies and share knowledge and, in order to promote reunification. So what is family centered about the teaming to promote partnerships practice profile is that, again, I sound like a broken record, but just making sure that we're supporting not just children, youth, and emerging adults, but also their families and their support systems. And again, that we're all working together to minimize any re-traumatization, that we're working with the family team to contribute information about the individual, and so that we can make determinations as to whether this is working or whether it's not, or whether we need to go back to the drawing board and tweak some things, or change some things, or add some support. Your input is integral to that, and we really, again, through the lens of the IPM and the practice profile, it's an important North Star for making sure that what we're doing is consistent and is best practice. And it's individualized and strength-based, that we interpret individual and family behavior as strengths. And that we understand how trauma plays a role in that. And then being, again, culturally and linguistically responsive, community focused. Again, I sound like a broken record, but what we mean with this and the teaming to promote partnerships practice profile is just that we are all collectively working together and collaborating to support these principles. So I want to open the floor now to everybody else. I think I've talked long enough here. And I just wanted to throw this question out there, is where are the opportunities for resource parents to partner and team with families and local departments? Where do you see this? Again, in some places this is happening, regularly, some places maybe not as much. So where do you see the opportunities, and what do you think?
Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can answer in the chat, but please speak up, because now's a chance for dialogue.
Hey Kim, it's Bill Blevins from the Baltimore City.
Hi, Bill.
Thanks for hopping on and giving the presentation. I think one of the ways that just having the involvement meetings, I know the icebreaker meetings, those type, I think that's a great idea right off the bat to be able to get on a call and talk to birth parents as resource parents and find out some information about the children, that we're just receiving. I think that's a great opportunity.
Great. That's good. Yeah, I agree with you. And, again, if we can do it and do it well, it sets the tone, I think, across the board. Great point. Anybody else?
Can you please define the icebreaker and comfort calls and things like that? Because maybe it's because I'm in Baltimore City. I've been doing this for 2 years and haven't heard of any of this stuff. So
Yeah, and this policy has just been released, Emily. So, the calls,
We will be discussing them and going over the policies and the paper and the expectations or what's hoped for a lot closer in the month of July. These meetings will focus and feature those two things, icebreakers and comfort calls. And then we'll roll on into the other part of the policy, which is the continuum of contact. So outside of the icebreakers are a more formalized meeting in the first 5 days, and a comfort call is a call that happens within the first 12 hours of a child coming into care. That's probably as far as we'll go in our discussions tonight. Hopefully that gives you an idea, but they'll be discussed in significantly more detail in question and answer in July.
so Emily, you're from Baltimore City, DSS?
yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that's not something that you're doing currently in practice.
No, I mean, we had a long-term placement, so if this stuff has rolled out since the beginning, and that stuff seems like it happens at the beginning, maybe that's what the reason for it. But I thought I heard you say some of this stuff is a couple years old, and
So
I'm really surprised because it doesn't sound familiar to me.
Well, the policy is new. I think the practices in some areas of the state, they have been doing those things, but it hasn't been consistent. And again, that's another important role of the IPM is to, again, kind of try to build that consistency. So good question. And thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else?
Kim, has this been rolled out? And I know I thought you said there was a couple different local departments that were maybe going to spearhead this, try this, since we're kind of first in the nation to do it.
So you're talking about Family First. We're one of the first states that have rolled out some of the prevention initiatives with EBPs. That hasn't officially launched yet, but we're getting close.
Gotcha. Do we know when that's going to roll out, or?
Yeah, probably in the fall is what we're shooting for.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else? What about, where do you see the barriers? Let me get to that question. Anybody want to talk about that?
I think when hi, is Arnetta back as Baltimore City resource parent. I think some of the barriers are communication. When they want to place a child, they teach us you better ask as many questions as you can while you can, because you don't know. But some stuff I don't feel was divulged, and we had to learn as we go. So we got a child in our home, we have to get to know and see if they're a good fit. recently we disrupted our first placement. It was very hard. He was here 7 months. And after 7 months, a lot of behaviors started to present that we weren't equipped for. And I didn't want to cause him more trauma.
Yeah.
So we made the decision to put him in a treatment foster home. But the good news is we stay in touch with his new foster mom and kind of try to help her navigate unlike what we had. So
Great. And that's another, I think, really important point about teaming. That's a good illustration of it, Arnetta. You know, is that kind of continuity is really critical for these children. And so I think I just, you know, commend you. And that's exactly what we want to continue to make our North Star, right? Is that that's what teaming looks like and should look like. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Thoughts on opportunities and barriers? What do you think?
Hey, I have a question about this because listening to the presentation, it all seems very good, and except that I think that the bio family have lots of reasons to not particularly want to team. They could be pretty angry. There's probably some fairly severe dysfunction there, because otherwise, you know, why are the children kind of, you know, being taken into foster care at all? So if everyone is coming to the room wanting to team and cooperate and participate and so on, it's great. But I feel there could be, I feel what I need maybe are some case studies with some examples that show how the bio family is won over to a cooperative approach instead of an adversarial one.
So I'm just going to add this, Steve. Actually, we did some of this with my now daughter. She's now my adopted daughter. But at one point, it became a problem with a certain individual because that person was using our interactions as trying to find fault with us to make a case.
So this is, you know, and again, that's why I brought this up. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think the shift that we're making in practice is to, you know, do everything that we do have some level of influence and control over, to build the relationship from the ground up, and to really start with the really intentional ways that we do team and work with birth families. And yes, there are times when that's going to be easier than other times, but it is a practice expectation that we have to shift toward in order to again promote those best outcomes, and, you know, make sure that what we're doing enhances any protective factor that we can for a child, and promoting those supports and minimizing re-traumatization. And sometimes it means making, you know, I don't have to tell all of you this, it means making really difficult decisions. Emily, you had your hand up.
That's Ryan, but I was just going to say one of the big gaps, I think, in terms of that kind of cooperation is there's a lot of parts of the system that aren't set up for cooperation. One area is the family involvement meetings. The circumstances of that actually dictate that resource parents and biological parents might not be at the table together, because a biological parent can choose not to have the resource parents at the meeting. That's a huge gap, and it cuts that communication out of the process. So that's one thing. Second is there doesn't seem to be a lot of expectation setting up front for both biological parents and resource parents. One area I think that's really underutilized is the prudent parenting standards. A lot of other states do a lot better job at laying out those expectations to the biological parents about what that experience is going to look like and what their child's day-to-day is going to look like. and vice versa for the resource parents to say, you know, this is going to be the biological parent's role going forward. I don't feel like there's a lot up front in either of those areas. I've actually gotten pushback from social work, from caseworkers against prudent parenting standards, which is federal law and it's not state law. So I don't know why there's pushback against that. But there seems to be a gap in the expectation settings in those areas. And I don't know if there's a mechanism to address that, but having those expectations set up front would go a long way to provide a better experience for the child.
Yeah, and I think some of that is coming with some of these policy shifts, actually. And, you know, this is just the start. So I think that's important information for us to know and take back as well. Because, you know, again, there are some barriers that we do need to continue to work toward removing in order to really practice model the way it's intended. But a lot of it is setting those frameworks and structures up front. And that's why we're kind of starting with the promoting partnerships policy as a way to do that. And some of the changes that we're seeing with the teaming policy. And what you said about teaming too, with the, you know, that's another reason why we really want to make sure that practice encompasses not just the use of family team decision meetings, but that, you know, teaming can happen outside of family team decision meetings. And often you know, sometimes the reason that they're adversarial too is because there hasn't been the prep work before we get to the point of that critical decision and needing to have those more formalized meetings. So that is part of the shift that we're trying to promote.
So
And yet,
one of the questions or barriers I had, you know, when we talk about mentoring and standing beside bio parents, I think that's good. And there's a lot of value there, but are we going to have more access to what the parents get well plan is? Because it's tough to encourage someone if you don't really understand more of their history and their background, but you certainly want to balance that with their privacy. And have you talked about, had conversations about that, and whether or not more information would be available to the foster parents, the resource parents, so that we know kind of specifically how to engage in areas that biological parents need to grow in?
that is, you know, and one of the reasons why we're really shifting the emphasis to building that relationship early on is so that there is the trust. The hope is that there's more trust to be able to let that happen organically, let that partnership happen organically, if at all possibly.
Yeah, I think that's true.
At all possible.
But they're probably not going to share their dirty laundry on their own, right?
Yeah.
We're all very proud, right? And we're not going to volunteer negative information. So I think that would be the hope. I agree, but I think it's really unlikely that information is going to come from the parents to the resource parents in that way.
Yeah. And, you know, it is, like you said, it is a careful balancing act, but the hope and the intention is that whatever we can share, we will share, because that's honestly in the best interest of everybody.
Can you share their plan, like their, you know, the actual, I think, or I've been led to believe there's an actual plan for parents. And is that something that could be shared? Maybe not the history and the specific reasons that the children in care, but can you share the plan and the steps that mom and dad should be taking? Or is even that not something that can be shared?
So I can't speak to that specifically. I don't know. Is Becky on the phone? I'm wondering if you might want to chime in about this too.
Sure, I'm here. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, confidentiality is going to prevent social workers from sharing the specific plan and the service agreement and the specific court orders. So I think Kim answered the question kind of the way that I would, which is if we are able to share the information, we absolutely should. But legally, there is so much information that we are prevented from sharing with resource parents or other community partners if we don't have a signed release from the parent to do so. And that absolutely puts resource parents at a disadvantage. We totally understand that, and that is unfortunate. And there are situations where, you know, the social workers want to be able to share the full story and the full picture, because we know that you don't have that in a lot of cases. And we still aren't able to do that when it is specifically related to the parent. When it's related to the child, we're able to share that information because we hold custody of the child. We have legal custody and court orders that say that, but but we don't with the parents. So I think some of that information is unfortunately at this time going to continue to be limited.
Yeah, so I think that would be a good area to give feedback to lawmakers, that if we're going to go down this path, which I think we should, I think it's a great path to go down, that would be one barrier that we could use help from lawmakers in helping remove or minimize.
I agree. Absolutely. I will add that to our list of feedback.
And one of the things is that very issue was one of the key components in the survey that was done last year, where resource parents feel that they have the skills to help in these kind of situations, but they do not have the information to utilize those skills in helping biological families.
Yep. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts, reflections?
Again, I just wanted to say, I thought it always was interesting that everybody has a lawyer except for the foster parent. And I've gotten a lot of information from my foster son's lawyer because it affects him.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found really interesting also was I got information from his doctor, his pediatrician, who had been with him his entire life. So I used to be a bill collector, so I'm an investigator, I guess. So I get information where I can get it and use it if I need it.
Yeah.
So, and be approachable, be open to. You know, sometimes you can build a relationship with the bio parent. My foster son's bio mom called me after he left and said, we really want you to stay in his life, you know? So I'm really happy about that. And I'm happy about this new program we're rolling out, because I feel like maybe foster parents will get to be heard more and more included. It's needed because the children are looking to us. And if we say we don't know, then who are they gonna? He would quickly say, can I call my lawyer? Can I call my caseworker? Because you don't know. So sorry, I'm so talkative. My husband's sleeping. I can't talk him to death. So.
So her point about the lawyer is really an excellent one. I had some experience with that as well. And particularly you get into these gray areas of information that can be changed, it would be helpful to have an advocate who really understood the law.
It's a good point.
Kim, is there any, I know some money comes with this, some federal money, I believe you said at the beginning. Some of these things in place. Is that the, I guess, you know, for lack of a better term, is that the carrot to kind of get the local DSS to kind of hop on board? Do they get extra federal funds for this? Or is it more, hey, we think this is a good idea, put it in place? Or do they have to? Or
so the funding shift that's most significant with Families First is
60 days.
60 days?
More like
60 days. So the idea is that the money that was traditionally used only for foster care, for, you know, again, rather than being proactive and preventive, the, you know, reaction of, you know, child maltreatment, you know, being foster care, right? There is now the ability to pay for evidence-based practice services on the front end to prevent children from coming into care. And then the other piece to that, like I said before, I think there is definitely added funding to support qualified residential treatment placements. So there are higher expectations, but there will be higher pay for quality care in those residential placements. So those are the two ends of the spectrum with Family First.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And how will permanency workers and caseworkers be trained in all of this? Because that seems like that could be either an opportunity or a barrier, depending on their knowledge of these expectations and how equipped they are to implement them, and also attitudes towards them.
So there will be a training that will be rolled out to them in the fall when this gets implemented.
But a training doesn't seem like it's quite adequate to change attitudes and entrenched behaviors or expectations. Like, you can be trained on something, but it doesn't mean that then you're an advocate for it, or you feel like it's a good thing to do. Like, it feels like there has to be some more structures in place to make sure that caseworkers are held accountable to implementing these kinds of things and providing the supports to make it possible.
So can you be more specific about that? Because I don't know that I'm following exactly what you mean.
Well, in our experience and some experiences of our friends who have been resource parents, if you have a permanency worker who believes that, for instance, a foster parent is only fostering because they can't have kids of their own and therefore want to adopt, then that permanency worker is not going to support that resource parent's involvement or teaming, because they're not going to trust them and the advice or the opinions that they share. Or in our case, where we received conflicting information from a caseworker, where one time they said, you're not allowed to tell the foster or the birth parent how to parent. A couple weeks later, they told us you can force the birth family to do what you want because you're older and wiser. Like, there's something in there about their attitudes towards the system that I'm not sure a simple training saying this is a new policy is actually going to create change in terms of them enabling and empowering this kind of teaming.
Well, I think, there is coaching that's rolling out in the next month across the state as well regarding the integrated practice model. So the training I was referring to was about Families First, and that's very technical and specific training. With the IPM, there's a training that we're in the midst of rollout now, kind of wrapping up with their 3 modules that the workforce is being trained in. And there's coaching that's designed to reinforce some of the tenets of the practice model, as well as, and that's aimed at supervisors and shifting some of the supervisory practices as well.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Answers your question. So it is a little more intensive and extensive than just training.
Okay, we're at 9:25 and we're going to wrap it up in the next couple minutes. So if you have any other questions, but as we're wrapping it up, please put your name and jurisdiction in the chat so we can cross it off to give you your full credit for being here tonight. Thank you all for your questions, and please, we'll circle back here in a minute or two and you can ask any final questions. Thank you, Kim, for being part of this. Thank you, Becky, for your input. I would agree, there is concern, and we hear questions from around the state around culture. This is not only a culture shift for resource parents, there is a culture shift as well that will need to happen with caseworkers. And sometimes I've been a resource parent for 20+ years. I do think sometimes that there are some caseworkers that'll have a harder time than others shifting their practice to meet these. So it's going not only to be resource parents, but caseworkers. And of course, as we become more involved with the families of origin, the bio parents, there will be other kickback, etc., from them or barriers that continue to surface. So that's one of the reasons we want to continue to have this conversation. It's one of the reasons we will be continuing this conversation in July on the first Tuesday of July. Becky Rice, who you heard speak just a couple minutes ago, will be one of our presenters that night, and she'll be talking about some of the forms, some of the ideas we have, how to make this work better for you as resource parents, how to think ahead as to what information you might want to share, something that you're comfortable with, so you're not doing this in the spur of the moment, but doing it with some thoughtful preparation as to what you're comfortable with. There'll be potentially some discussion around using a Google app, which you use for your phone, so that you have things like that set up so that you are prepared when these situations arise. So thank you all for joining us. Are there any final questions or anything else anybody would like to add? Or Kim, do you have something you would like to say in a closing statement, or as we bring this to an end?
Yeah, I just want to thank all of you for the opportunity, and really, and thank you for all of your hard work. This has been a crazy year, to say the least. And I think, you all have gone above and beyond, and you're just really special people. It takes a special person to be a foster parent, and I just want to thank you and recognize all the hard work that you put in every day. Thank you very much. And thank our resource home workers too. You guys have done an amazing job over the last year, especially.
This is what we call, I'm answering the question. I wanted to know, is this the third class session? Actually, this is just what we refer to as the third Tuesday, because it's the third Tuesday of the month. This is actually the first discussion that we will be having, and the first Tuesday and potentially the third Tuesday of July will build on this subject and build on the practice profiles for resource parents, although we will go in depth into the information that will be given to biological families when a child comes into care, and talk about some of the other items that are a little more specific to the icebreakers and comfort calls and the continuum of contact. Those will be the subjects that we will be discussing in the month of July. Becky, do you have anything you wanted to say about those, since you're going to be one of our presenters in July?
Just that I'm really excited to have the discussion. And I think some of the feedback from tonight was excellent and really relevant. And if you're able to join us for those discussions and brainstorming, we would love to have you, because I think together we can make this even better. So I would say thank you for the feedback, and I hope that you're able to join us on the first and third Tuesday in July.
Yes, I echo Becky's comment. Together, we will make it better. This is one of the opportunities where we get to showcase our teamwork and learn and contribute together. So once again, thank you for putting your names in the chat. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Kim, for your presentation. The presentation will be on the website in the next couple days, as long as the PowerPoint. So Kim, I think you sent me the PowerPoint the other day. So
Yes,
we
I
will
did.
attach it to the we'll attach it to the YouTube recording, as well as the policies that we're talking about, with all the form, are under the resource tab on our website. That is MRPA.org, or my preferable one, MDKids1.org, because working together, we will make Maryland's kids #1. So thank you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.